Mother Knows Death presents External Exams with Nicole and Jemmy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's External Exam on Mother Knows Death. Today's guest is Sheryl McCollum. You may know her from her podcast, Zone 7, and she's also on Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. Mac is a crime scene investigator who specializes in cold cases and is the director and founder of the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute. Hi, Mac. Welcome to the show.
How are you?
Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, honey, I am so excited to talk to you.
It's such an honor to talk to you. I have to tell you that my mom is so jealous that I'm talking to you right now. She loves you so much. She'll be listening to this, so please say hi to her.
Absolutely. What's your mama's name?
Her name is Beth.
Hey, Beth. We got to get together soon, girl. We got some things to talk about.
She would definitely agree with you there. So before we get started, you just have such an awesome career and an awesome resume. And I always like to ask people how they got into what they're doing now, like even from when you were a little kid. So I know a long time ago, back in 1982, you started your career in law enforcement. How did you get there? How did you get into that line of work?
Well, it actually started long before 1982, but that was my first formal introduction. But when I first became captivated, I was 4. And here's the deal. My mother was probably the greatest storyteller ever. And she could captivate you and just weave this story that just drew you in. So way back in the 60s, you got outside of Atlanta and radio stations wouldn't pick up anymore. So she would just tell us stories all the way to our destination.
That's so cool.
And when I was 4, she told us the story of Bonnie and Clyde, all 5 of us. And I couldn't get enough of them. I just couldn't understand. At first, there's this couple, they love each other madly, right? And the story she told us is they crisscrossed the United States, robbing banks. And I was like, I don't know why you and Daddy don't do that. I mean, that's a much better plan with 5 kids, lady. Like, we need some money, And so she only told us the real exciting part of the banks and the notes and the poetry and all that sort of stuff. So it was much later that I found out, of course, their ending and that they had actually, murdered people. So that's kind of where it all started. I just couldn't get enough of these crime stories, and she would tell them on every car trip. And sometimes I would beg her at night to please tell me a crime story. And she was like, honey, you don't want a crime story when you're trying to go to sleep at 4 and 5 years old. But I did. And so she would modify them, and tell me, little bits and pieces. But, I just became just so enthralled in the idea of Al Capone and John Dillinger and all these people. I thought they're not like anybody I've ever met, obviously. So I thought it was fantastic.
That's so cool. I was going to say, when you were first telling this story, so I was going to say, oh, your mom's like a little sick then, right? Like telling a little child that. And I always remember my grandma was kind of like that too, just always introducing us to stuff when we were really young. And it's cool though that she was able to talk to you on a level a 4-year-old could understand, but at the same time getting you into that. So I love that. So you've been into crime scenes and investigations since you were as long as you can remember.
Yes. And they were great at fueling that, but somewhat appropriately. So when I was 8, they took me to see the death car. So by 8, I knew what had happened to them. And the man that owned the car at the time let me sit in it. And the thing that I remember most, I can tell you right now, there's 2 things. The way the car smelled, because I'd never been in a really old car. And anybody that's been in an antique car knows the smell I'm talking about. And then the other thing was, as little as I was, there was nowhere I could sit in that car. There wasn't a bullet hole. Nowhere.
That's
not
so
in the
cool.
seat, not the floorboard, not the door, not the windshield. And at the time, even being 8, I thought, man, this was a little too much. Like it didn't take all this, but I didn't know anything about trajectory then. But I can tell you now, they had them dead to right. No doubt about it. You know,
Wow. That now I don't feel as bad for taking my kids to the serial killer museum.
exactly.
Your mom's like on the same level as me. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
So you got into so then you knew from the time you were a little kid you were going to get into some kind of law enforcement?
Right. So in 1982, 82, 83, I was in high school and I was just itching to actually get into it. Like I wanted real cases. I wanted real victims. I wanted to work with real detectives. And I just didn't want to wait my turn, you know? So Atlanta has a hospital, Grady Hospital. It's fabulous. It's very famous. They've got the burn center there. They're a level 1 trauma center. They're just tremendous. But they also serve our rape crisis center. So at 18, I could volunteer there, pick my shift, and then you're assigned an Atlanta sex crimes detective. So when I started working at 18 at the crisis center as a volunteer, I was assigned Detective Black with the rape crisis sex crimes in Atlanta. So I can tell you straight out of the gate, I had the best training there was. So I had real victims call the hotline. Several times you would have somebody actually come in and then they would call us down to the emergency room. So we went with them through the entire rape kit, the process of being interviewed. We wrote reports. Sometimes the victim might only want to talk to us. So the detective would rely on us greatly before, you know, he got in there and was able to really interview her his way. So I can tell you, without question, it's some of the best training I've ever had to this day.
That's kind of a heavy thing to do as one of your first jobs as an 18-year-old, right? Is
Yep.
dealing with rape victims and all. Were you when you started working in that field, were you almost a little shocked at what was really going on in reality when you learned
Oh,
about some of these
honey,
crimes?
shocked. Listen, just walking through the emergency room, you learn so much.
Oh,
Like there
yeah.
would be somebody stabbed with a pitchfork, somebody with the knife still in their neck. I mean, you can't even believe, like, you know how some people will call any job in law enforcement the show?
Yeah.
Baby, I was center stage. There's no doubt. And then I was able to come home and I could, you know, have all these fantastic stories and then, you know, go to school the next day. And while everybody else was, you know, getting a tutor in algebra, I was like, man, this guy was stabbed with a pitchfork. He had 3 perfect holes in his chest. You know, they were all spewing at the same time. That was so much better than algebra to me. So, you know, it was great.
I love that. So then you decided that you were did you go to college right from high school?
I did.
Okay. And then
Yes.
what was your major when you got your bachelor's degree?
Criminal justice.
So you just knew right away. And so when you go for
Yeah.
criminal justice, does that mean you're going to be a cop or what does that mean exactly?
You can do anything, police, courts, corrections. It's going to prepare you for all of it. So if you want to go into probation or law enforcement or working in the court somehow, you can do all of it, you know, but I always worked while I was in school. So really, technically, I went to school part-time. Like I didn't always go in the summer and I didn't always take a full load because I was working full-time somewhere. And again, I always thought it was something that was going to benefit me later down the road. So I worked as a store detective at a major mall, at a major store, and just had the time of my life doing that. At the same time, working at the crisis center. And so I would do internships that, you know, most people, when they go to college, they do one. I did like 20, you know, because I wanted to see all of it. I wanted to work for corrections. I wanted to see what probation was about. I wanted to see what the feds were about. So I had a great time.
That's cool. It's like you almost made your own internship in a way.
Yes, absolutely. And then people would tell me, like my advisors, they're like, you already have the internship. You're already done. I know, but this seems really interesting. I want to see what it is. Because I didn't want to just be locked in and boxed into one thing. And, you know, back then, people would sometimes get into auto theft. They might spend 20 years there. It's unusual now, but it wasn't back then. But I didn't want to do one thing for 20 years. I wanted to sample a little bit of all of it because 1, I found it more interesting. And 2, I thought all of these things are going to bleed together anyway. So it's important to me to have a little bit of something. And then the other thing that happens from that I will tell you was the greatest benefit that I ever had becomes your Rolodex, or nowadays your phone. Having these people that on the parole board, like you can get them on the phone. People that, are in burglary or auto theft or juvenile crimes. I mean, you can get these folks on the phone, and to me, that's when things start to happen.
Yeah, it's excellent networking that you've done for sure, which is why you are here where you're at today. So you're doing all these, your own internship, and when did you, I mean, I know that you were working with rape victims, but when did you start going on crime scenes of people who were murdered?
In the early 90s, I worked for the Crime Commission, and I was assigned to the Atlanta Police Department, and ultimately then assigned to what they called Operation Weed and Seed. So Operation Weed and Seed was in Zone 3, honey. The most violent, most rundown, just everybody was broke, everybody was mad, everybody had, hookers and drug dealers in their front yard. I mean, it was just, that's what it was. And so they put a group of us together, and we were supposed to go in and weed out the bad and seed in the good. And we spent 8 years doing that, and I had the time of my life. It was fantastic. I'm all about community policing anyway, and that gave us a chance to really see if we get in a community and do everything we can to help everybody, is it going to make a difference? And it did.
And when you were doing that, because crime scene investigation is such a broad thing. There's so many different things you could do within that field. Was there any, and I'm sure just knowing you that you did all of them because that's just how your brain works. Was there any particular one that, like part of it that you thought was really, really awesome?
Everything was awesome to me. And here's the thing, when you spend time watching Hill Street Blues or The Rookies or Policewoman, and then you're actually seeing this in action, you just feel like you're a part of something so special, but you're around these people that are extraordinary. So again, you've all heard it, but when you're watching these people that run toward the gunfire and that are helping this little child and that are helping this young kid and they're helping this elderly woman, those are the people you want to spend time with, because they're just magnificent people. And when I was assigned to the Major Case Division, I preach this, and I want everybody to hear me. I love being educated. I love being trained, but do not discount luck. Luck is a real thing, and it can be one of the greatest things that happens in your career. Well, I got real lucky because the Major Case Division, the prosecutor that was assigned to us was Nancy Grace.
That's awesome. I was actually going to ask you how you met her, because I don't know if you know this, but like if anyone ever asked me if you had one person on your list that was a famous person that you could meet, who would it be? And I'm always like, Nancy Grace. I don't want to meet any famous actresses or actors, but my daughter and I, who is my co-host on Mother Knows Death, we've been watching her together since Maria was a little kid and I was a teenager. Like, we just love her.
Let me tell you something. You're not going to be disappointed. You're not. And at CrimeCon, let's make that happen. Let's make it happen.
Oh my God, that would be a dream.
You can count on that.
Well, I already know that we're going to be having dinner or something together, so I'm like, let's do this.
Perfect.
So you became interested in cold cases kind of early on in your career. Mm-hmm. Can you describe to the listeners what a cold case is, just for people that are unfamiliar with that term?
Sure. The most accepted definition would be a case that's 3 or more years old with no new leads, no new witnesses coming forward, no new tips, nothing. It's just stalled. And if you have exhausted every avenue that you know, and that case is 3, 4, 5, 6, 20, 50 years old, that's a cold case.
And what was it about cold cases that piqued your interest?
Well, it's got to be the hardest to solve. So if you're gonna be on the dance floor, let's dance, baby, right? And so we got an opportunity not only to work some of these cases, but you go back to that Rolodex, right? And this is where, again, luck and preparation kind of collide, which is a fantastic thing. But if you have a job where you can literally call the best people in the world to help you and they will willingly do it, you're going to get some stuff done. And I will tell you and your listeners, in over 20 years of working cold cases, I have never called anybody, myself now, and had them tell me no. Not once. So those are the caliber of people you're talking about, whether it's Nancy Grace or Dr. Laura Petler, Maureen O'Connell, Francie Hakes, Paul Holes. You can just call them and they'll say, yeah, I'll help you. I'll take a look at it. So if I call Maureen O'Connell and I'm like, Maureen, I'm just stuck. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what I've missed. She'll say, hey, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Or she'll say, let's walk through it together. And then she'll give me advice. Paul Holes will do the same thing. Jim Clementi will do the same thing. Francie Hakes will do the same thing.
I love that because it just shows that all of these people have such a strong passion for what they're doing. I have similar things happen to me sometimes on Instagram. Somebody will send me an autopsy report and say, hey, so-and-so, my mom died. Can you just look at it and explain it to me? And I always want to do it. I just always want to.
Of course. But what a gift you are. If they're having trouble accepting whatever the death was, right? And you can walk them through anything or explain petechiae, they're going to sleep better. Now they know. They have something definitive from you. You have no skin in the game. You don't have a reason to say something that isn't accurate. So for you to take the time to do that, to me, again, extraordinary. And that's what I'm talking about. You don't go, well, yeah, I can look at it for $1,000.
Oh, no, I would never do that. And the thing is, that's one of the things.
That's what I'm saying, a gift.
Like, that's one of the things that I learned working in the hospital, all of these, because I used to deal with the deaths in the hospital, and the patients would call and they didn't even always want an autopsy. They just wanted to know how their family member died. And I couldn't believe that nobody sat them down and just explained to them what happened in their terms, not in medical terms, just like talking to someone like they're a regular person, you know?
Yep, correct. Yeah.
All right. So 20 years ago, you started the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute, which is so cool that you started this.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about this institute and the types of things that you do there?
Sure. So I was teaching college at that time as my part-time job, and I had students from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Well, you know, when you give folks that have already worked all day a break at 8 o'clock, they're not coming back. So I was sitting there after 2 hours going, well, that was a mistake, you know. So I thought, how can I engage them and get them excited about working on something for 4 hours after they've already been at work? Because we only had class on Tuesday and Thursday nights. So at that time, I was working for D. Stewart, the sheriff, and running his cold case stuff. And I said, Sheriff, can I take one of our cases to my class, redact everything, but literally build them a murder box and let them work along that case through everything we're going to go through with their criminal investigation class? He said, yeah, I like the idea. And he said, and maybe they'll come up with something. So that's what I did. So the very first night that I took the box, I just dropped it in the middle of the room at, 6 o'clock. And I said, okay, this is your case. Get to work. Girl, I had to throw them out at midnight. And I'm like, I am on to something. So I had a real good buddy at Faulkner University and a real good buddy at Auburn University, Montgomery. So I called them and I said, look, if your students will do the same case, because Lou Harris was a former FBI profiler and Linda Wright worked in security. And I said, if y'all look at it completely different set of students, and we come up with the same suspect independently, I would put my career on it. And that was the start of the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute, which we took that and then just matriculated it into a nonprofit and added colleges and universities and experts. And so today we have 35 colleges and institutions and about 600 experts that we can draw from. So
you say, because I did have a question about this. So you say you've redacted. So what do you take away, like their name and any kind of identifying factors?
Yes. Name, addresses, things like that. Right.
And what
Right.
about the rest of the case? I mean, I know that most autopsy reports are public anyway.
Hmm.
The photos and stuff too, like you could show all that stuff.
I showed them everything.
That's awesome. Of course, they didn't leave till midnight because it's like
Exactly. Because just like me, I mean, I was kind of understanding exactly what was happening because, again, that was a 17-year-old me at Grady. I'm watching it. I'm watching the circus and I'm loving it. Well, this is real. This is not anything mock, because I would do mock crime scenes and all that sort of stuff at the
it's just
college.
not the same.
It's not the same thing. So this was literally 2004. And there was no other college that I knew about doing anything close to this. I had people like Dr. Henry Lee. I mean, some major players saying, hey, think about this, do it this way. Because at the time, he only used graduate students, and the University of Tennessee Body Farm used graduate students. I was using undergrads that were going to school part-time, and they were killing it. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be in grad school to be able to figure some of this stuff out, right?
Nope. And I used to say it all the time. Anybody can solve a cold case. And I had a federal person that I respected that was really challenging me. And he was like, this is not going to work out. Doesn't make any sense. Not everybody can do it. You're talking about somebody with no training, no experience. And I said, well, I noticed the other day you were putting up some posters and you were asking the general public for some help. So you must think somebody out there might can help you. Well, you take somebody and you got, let's say, 50 people in a room. How many vocations and avocations are you talking about? So I don't read music. I don't speak a foreign language. I couldn't tell you one tattoo necessarily from another, but there are people that do. And so if you have somebody with a really unique tattoo and that person can tell you, oh my gosh, that is this type of ink that is generally done in California with that kind of lettering, or this is a koi fish, which only about 5 people can do. One's in Las Vegas, one's in Atlanta, whatever. They're giving you information you don't have. And it's a beautiful thing. So anybody can help solve a cold case. Anybody.
Yeah, I mean, that theory is great because just to be I feel like to be a good leader anyway, you have to just have, like you said, this Rolodex of people to
No,
because you can't possibly even if you're the best, you can't be that good. You just can't know everything.
you
But
can't.
you could know who to call or who to ask, and then that makes you really good. That's my opinion anyway.
That's my opinion too. And I know when they were younger, my children would laugh when they would hear me say this because I would say it in a speech or whatever, and they would get so tickled about it. But I want to be the dumbest person in the room. If I'm not, we have limitations. You know things about autopsies I don't know. Why in the world would I not call you? Why would I not say, look, this is an autopsy from 76. I don't even understand the, verbiage he's using. You're going to be able to tell me. That's great. That's how it should work.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think people let their ego get in the way sometimes, for
A little
sure.
bit. A little bit.
So have you and I think this is so cool that you started this so long ago because now, I mean, even some people on YouTube and stuff that aren't really crime scene people at all, they just seem like regular people have ideas about certain cases and you
Sure.
listen and you're kind of like, that's kind of, that could be a thing, you know?
Yeah, that's
Um,
pretty good.
So
Yeah.
how has that changed since the internet started? Because clearly 20 years ago there was not much of what there is today, obviously, with the TikTok and the YouTube and
Mhm.
everything videos. And true crime is more, I feel like it's just way more blown up now than it was 20 years ago, as far as just like everybody being obsessed with it.
Sure.
How have things changed for you? Have you had more people wanting to be a part of the Cold Case Institute? That's cool.
Yes. And I've also had people call and say, hey, I want to start my own. Great. I will give you our playbook. Whatever you like, take it. If you don't like it, don't use it. But I'll give you an example of how it's changed. Way back, this must have been 2005, I got a letter from a lady that was 98 years old. and she wanted to give me some advice on the Chandra Levy case. It was brilliant. And she's like, I've just been a housewife and a mother, and now I'm a great grandmother. I don't have any training or anything. I thought she was spot on. I thought it was excellent. But that took somebody sitting down, finding an address, writing a letter, going to the mailbox, that kind of thing. Most people don't do that. But with the internet, they don't have to. They can send me a quick IM, right? They don't even have to research an address or anything. It's going to be right there. They can message me. So I get a ton more advice and information and theories than I have ever gotten. And it only gets better,
It's cool because all people think differently, and you don't need to. You don't necessarily need to be educated. You just need something.
Yeah.
Even somebody could bring up a question that might spark something else in your mind to be like, oh, that's something I overlooked. I didn't even think about that.
Sure. But and everybody has different backgrounds. And that is so important to let that factor in. Like, we were working a case and everybody thought that a married man had murdered this person, but the victim was somebody this person was having an affair with. Well, we're all, bantering back and forth. And at this time in the war room, it was predominantly women. And finally, one of the male students spoke up, and he's like, Mac, why would he kill a side piece? He didn't care about her like that. Well, I had never even heard the term side piece. And I'm like, what? But he's a man that's maybe played around a little bit. And so he was trying to give his experience. Like, it's not that serious with her. He said, I'm telling you, it's not. He's probably cheated before. His wife's not going to be even all that shocked. It's not like he's going to, bust up his family life. So again, you just have different people that can add. And, I'll often tell people, it was a school teacher that cracked the first Zodiac code.
Yeah.
What I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
it was a truck driver.
Really cool.
It was a truck driver that found the DC sniper. So people of all walks of life, every avocation and vocation, hobby, job, they can help.
And so at your research institute, is it just for people in the profession, or can regular people be a part of it too?
The short answer is yes, they can. We need experts, obviously, but it depends on what your expertise is. It doesn't have to be criminal justice. Hairdressers. I've got a knot tying expert. I've got an expert from the railroad. I've got an expert in motorcycles. Because again, when you start dealing with 1%ers, both of those things are going to come into play. I need somebody that can explain a tattoo to me with great authority. I need somebody that can explain, hey, you're a hairdresser, but everybody says you're going to see domestic violence before somebody else will. She may confide in you when she's not confiding in anybody else. So all of these things come into play. All of these things build on each other, and it takes all of us sometimes.
That's so cool. I love this well-rounded way you have of investigating things. It just makes total sense.
Well, thank you. I think so.
It really does. Like, it reminds me of something silly at the hospital. We had the morgue redone, and some manager like designed the morgue for us.
Whoa.
And we went in the first day and they revealed it to us, and we're like, yeah, clearly you've never done an autopsy before. Like,
clearly.
Why are you doing this, right? So instead of asking like the experts that did the autopsies every day, sometimes, the people overlook that. And I think that that's really important. And that's why you're successful, because you see that. I see that you have some of your family members volunteering at your institute, and you have 4 sisters, which, God, that in itself is a challenge, but they all volunteer there. And I love that. Are they into the same stuff as you? Because obviously they were sitting in the car with Mom listening to all these stories.
Right. 2 are retired teachers and 2 are nurses.
That's cool.
So, I think everybody is in, a job where we want to help people. That's a common theme, I think. They're older than me. And in case they're listening,
you just have to get that out. Just get that dig in.
They're elderly. And so they were going to volunteer, whether I wanted to or not. But anyway, they have such a command of understanding people. And I say this all the time about teachers, but teachers are profilers. They see so many kids. In the first 5 minutes, they know who their troublemaker is going to be. They know who the athlete is. They know who the shy one is. They know the one that is nice to your face, but is still going to be a problem to other kids, you know. They're going to know the smart one, all that sort of stuff. But they know it quickly, and they're never hardly wrong. Rarely are you going to hear a teacher say, man, I was wrong about that kid. That is almost never true, right? So the two sisters that I have, one was a PE teacher before she retired, and one was a science teacher. So they have those backgrounds that when they bring and they're looking at a case, it's from different angles. Their parents, their spouses, they are sisters, you know, their aunts. So they have different ways to look at a case. So I'll give you a true example. I was called by the sheriff regarding Susan Smith. And he said, do you think you can come up? And I said, yeah, I can come up. No problem. I did not have children at the time. I had nieces and nephews that I loved crazy good, but they weren't mine, so to speak. So I was packing. So I wanted to call two of my sisters real quick and just say, look, I'm headed out of town. I'll be back by Monday, whatever. So I called Sharon and I said, this is what's going on. This woman, she was carjacked. It's horrible. The guy put a gun in her face. She got out of the car. He jumped in the car and drove off. She said, huh? She said, you're telling me he put a gun in her face and she got out of the car? I said, yes, it was horrible. I'm sure it was terribly frightening. She said, I'm telling you right now, 6th grade teacher now, 6th grade teacher, never been in a physical fight, not somebody that you would consider super brave. You know what I mean? She said, I'm telling you, if my children were in that car, I wouldn't have got out. He would have had to shoot me right there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, really? Okay. Hung up from her, called Charlene. I said, hey, I'm packing. I'm going out of town. I'll be back by Monday. What's going on? Well, they've got this woman. She was carjacked. It was horrible. This guy put a gun in her face. She got out of the car, jumped in the car, and drove off with the children in the back seat. Charlene said, there ain't no way I'd have got out of that car. And at the time, she wasn't a nurse yet. She was a flight attendant. So now I'm like, I've got a 6th grade teacher and a flight attendant telling me they wouldn't have got out of the car. First thing they said. So I called the sheriff back and I said, I'm just telling you, you need to keep her talking. She might have had something to do with it. And he said,
that's amazing.
Well, I'm saying to you, because you can't discount what these people are saying. And to your point, no training, not in the business, but they knew as a mama. So he said to me, he said, we're already thinking that way. So they already knew something was not right because too many people, right, were saying the same thing, I assume, because by the time I talked to him again, he was on the right track. And of course, we know the ending.
It's funny because last night I went out with one of my kids, my 11-year-old, and we've been having a lot of carjacks in our area recently. And I just, for some reason, was thinking like, oh my God, like what if that happened? And I thought, I just was like, I would get shot in the face. Like I would not get out of this damn car. Like it just would, you know, I just try to think about like, what would you do in that situation? And I'm like, of course, any mother would say that. So
yep. But it's weird when that mama thing kicks in. Like you spent your adult career looking at death. Like this, you've seen every way somebody could die, just about. But yet you're sitting there going, shoot me in the face.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not getting
when
out.
It comes to my kid, of course.
Yeah.
Now, I just would never, like, I would fight till the very end. I mean, what do you know? So that's how you know that something's up. But I hear about that stuff too, about people, because my husband's a firefighter, and sometimes you hear stories of, like, the mom ran out and the kid's still in the house. And I'm like, no, that wouldn't happen. And he's like,
would not.
You don't understand if you were in a fire. And I'm like, I try to like listen to him and think, okay, well, like he's been in a fire. I haven't, but no, I'm like, no, that I don't think so. Yep. I just wouldn't. I'm sorry. You're wrong.
It's certainly hard to fathom leaving knowing they're in the house.
Exactly. Just like, I just can't think that it could ever happen, honestly.
Right.
No matter what he says.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by my book, Nicole Angemi's Anatomy. Do you have my book yet? If not, you better get it because it's really awesome. It is an A through Z journey of the human body and everything that could go wrong with it. Get it now at thedoramater.com/book. So I know that you said that you were a teacher, and that story relates to me so much because when I started college, I went to those horrible 6 to 10 o'clock classes, and my class certainly was not as entertaining as yours. I'll tell you that. But you also wrote a textbook on cold cases too, called Cold Case Pathways to Justice. You were a co-author on that book. So is that a textbook that's used for criminal justice students?
Yes. So when the Institute first started, I kept thinking, man, why is there not a textbook that would help me teach this so that I didn't have to go back and keep repeating things? So like a timeline, for example. Once you teach them how to do a timeline, I want them just to roll with it. But I would sometimes have to stop and go back if somebody missed class, or stop and explain why you don't start the timeline here. You start in the middle. You're doing the same thing over and over and over, or how to read an autopsy or whatever it might be, how to research old newspapers and really understand it. Or for this generation, how to read cursive. Lord help us.
Oh, God.
Okay. So I thought, why is there not a textbook? Well, there just wasn't one conducive for what I wanted. So my real good buddy, Betsy Ramsey, again, try not to do anything alone, y'all. Betsy has written a ton of books. She's smart and she types really quick. So I thought she'll be good. So me and Betsy decided that was what we were going to do to help the Institute so these students actually had a book they could utilize. So that's how that happened.
That's really cool. I love that you are teaching students too. You're just doing so much. It's just great for this whole entire field. At one point in your career, you were the director. Like I just keep naming off all these amazing accomplishments you have. You were director of Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Wow, you went way back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I really am interested in this because I have a particular distaste for people who drink and drive. It
Yes.
just really annoys the shit out of me.
Yes.
And on Mother Knows Death, so we've talked about a couple cases that have been in the news, but before we get into those cases, I just want to talk to you about two particular cases, just because almost half of traffic deaths are caused by drunk drivers. It's just a completely avoidable thing. And in the U.S., 37 people approximately die every single day just from drunk drivers. It's a staggering number. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization of Mothers Against Drunk Driving and how you got involved with that?
Well, here's what happened. When I was 5, my mom was hit head on by a truck driver.
Oh my God.
And I was in the car with her, and she was hit head on, and then her car slammed into a telephone pole, which cracked in half and fell over our convertible. And there was live wires down everywhere. So all the people around that were trying to stop and help couldn't come to her to help her because the live wires. So I remember the fire department. They were just, of course, extraordinary, like they always are. And so fast forward, 1996, I was in charge of the Olympic Crisis Response Team, which would not have been a big deal, except we had a bomb. So the way we worked that bombing, Mothers Against Drunk Driving called and said, hey, can you put together a statewide plan for us like you did for the Olympics and all the venues across the state of Georgia? And I said, yes. So that's how I got involved with MAD for a short period of time, but a fantastic organization. I mean, you can't even say enough what Candy Lightner did. I mean, she had an idea. She did it. She had the, blood alcohol limit. She lowered it again to, 0.08. She has saved Lord knows how many people. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm a drinker, not a drinker per se, that sounded bad. Hold on a minute. My kids would die laughing if they heard me say that. But I love a margarita here and there, a glass of wine here and there. But there's no excuse getting in that car. There's just not, especially nowadays with Uber and all the different ride shares. And, everybody knows the designated driver. Everybody should have one person in their friendship group that just doesn't drink. So you've got that designated driver built in. But
That's
there's
me.
just,
I'm the DD.
but I mean, that's beautiful. And that's what I'm saying. CrimeCon, me and Nancy will use you.
I definitely will. Like I'm not against it. Well, I'm against drinking and driving, obviously. You're just gonna think this sounds ridiculous. I just don't like the way it tastes. I think it tastes like hairspray. I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I
get
tried
it.
to make myself like it. Like I just don't
Sure.
like it.
But what you used to do for a living, and you can walk through any hospital and ask any emergency room or trauma nurse, how many people do you see that alcohol was a factor? Not just driving, but falling off crap, hurting yourself. You know what I mean? Alcohol is probably responsible for 70% of the folks that are in a hospital any given time.
Oh yeah, and not to mention just in pathology between smoking and drinking, it's like we would have nothing to look at all day.
See?
It's such a cause of disease. I used to do all the liver explants that came out when people were getting transplants from alcoholic cirrhosis, and just I've done a ton of autopsies on it, just the heart disease is associated with it and everything. And I've seen it firsthand, and I don't know. I'm sure that has something to do with me not being into it either.
Yep.
So on the news, we talked about a few months ago, Patrick Mahomes' dad. He was arrested on his third DUI charge. Third. How common is it for people to just have 3 DUI charges and still be allowed to drive? Like, what's the problem?
I think Nancy Grace and I covered a show where a guy had like 20 something. I don't understand. I don't care who your son is. I don't care if a Super Bowl's involved. They should take his license. He is going to kill somebody or himself. He clearly has a problem, because here's the deal. He could go to any stadium. Who would give him a ride home? Anybody.
Everyone there.
Everybody there.
I could be in the car with Patrick Mahomes' dad. Yeah, exactly.
All day long. I will get you home, sir. But again, he's alone and he's over the legal limit. He has a problem. He does. And I mean, to me, this is a crime that is 100% preventable. 100%.
What is this? I do remember you talking with Nancy Grace about this, that there's this theory that there's been studies done that even though a person so he's been pulled over only 3 times and caught, but how many times has a person drank before and drove before getting caught? What's that number?
Well, let me just tell you something. How many speeding tickets, everybody in your audience, how many speeding tickets have you had? 1, 5, 20?
Me, maybe 1. My husband, maybe 51, but he drives like he's going to a fire all the time. So you know
all
how
the time.
is.
So you've had 1 speeding ticket. How many times have you sped in your life?
Yeah, like every day.
There you go.
Probably.
There's no different. So these folks are like, I've only had 3. Oh, I've only had 5. And you hear people say the same thing. Oh, I drive better when I'm drunk. They say these things that's just so asinine. And then my favorite is, well, I'll just have a cup of coffee and then I'll be okay. Okay. Coffee, you're just going to be awake and drunk. Okay. Coffee does not take alcohol out of your bloodstream. It doesn't. I don't know where that ever came from except cartoons and TV. Oh, get a pot of coffee. They'll be okay. No, the alcohol has got to get out of your system the only way that it can.
It really makes me so mad. And especially this other case that I want to talk about is this bride. Her name was Samantha Miller. She was killed on her wedding night. And her husband, her new husband of only hours, was injured. And the woman that killed her name was Jamie Lee Komorowski, I believe it is. And she was 3 times over the legal limit of alcohol. And of course she lived, right? This is how it always works.
Yep, most of the time.
So I don't even know in what world this woman got out of jail and is home on house arrest with an ankle bracelet. Is this common that people just kill people in an accident like this and don't even stay in jail?
Well, a lot of people do say that she didn't target them. She didn't mean to do it. And I completely understand that. But that is the risk you take when you get in that car that you could. So no, you didn't know this bride. You didn't show up to murder her, but that's what you did. And while you were pouring that first drink, she was putting her wedding dress on. When you were pouring that second drink, she was saying her vows. When you poured the third drink, she's going into the reception. Again, another drink, she's having her first dance. The next drink, she's telling everybody goodbye. So you're talking about somebody dying, and she's just seen a room full of people who all love her and are wishing her well with this person that she wants to spend the rest of her life with. And because of alcohol, because of your choice, I'm going to drink tonight. I'm going to get blasted. I'm not going to stop. And then I'm going to get in a car.
I just can't justify it in any way. And
Nope. There's no way to justify it.
Like people that even say that she didn't intend to kill them, like they're just as bad to me. Like, what are you talking about? So if you carry a loaded gun around and shoot people by accident, that's cool. Like,
well, yeah, it's almost even scarier because if you make somebody mad and they say, I'm going to come over to your house, you at least have a fair shot, right? You're talking about somebody in a 3,000-pound vehicle coming at whoever is in their path. A child crossing the street, a bus full of children, a church van full of elderly people, just whoever. Into a store, into a restaurant. We see it all the time.
I know. It just scares me so much.
But again, preventable, 100%. All you got to do, get drunk, stay home. Get drunk and call a cab. Call Uber. Call somebody.
I can't help but think that, like with Patrick Mahomes' dad and then this girl, I heard she's like a rich kid or something. There's some kind of financial thing behind her that's helping her get out. I'm pretty sure she's not like a regular income person, right? This happened in my town actually. That it was, I don't know if it was the mayor or some person's kid, the president of the school board or something like that. Like drunk drove into a pizza shop in our neighborhood, and I heard got like a slap on the wrist. And it's a sidewalk where children walk all the time, and thank God there were none there at the time. But that could have went terribly wrong,
But I also think, because I know Tiffany Haddish got a DUI in my town. And again, just like Patrick Mahomes' dad, who would have given her a ride? Everybody. So they don't even want that. They don't want it. They'd rather drive. I mean, it just makes no sense.
It really, I don't know what to say.
I think taking the license should be automatic at your third one. I don't think you should get a third one and be able to drive again for at least a period of time.
Yeah,
so some of these things
even
we need
after
to
a
keep fighting
second,
for.
yeah, I think one time, I'm not cool with it anytime, but one time I actually know someone that had one, and that like straightened his shit out big time, and that will never happen again.
Yep.
And I think that that's the point, because he did lose his license for a couple months, and it affected a lot. It was not good.
Oh yeah.
So I think that I feel like if anybody has really bad habits, and whether it's you're cheating on someone, you're doing something kind of terrible, the only way that you can really stop that is if something kind of really bad that's like life-changing happens, so you can change your ways. I think that just saying you're going to do it, most of the time that doesn't really pan out.
Yep.
But for those people that doesn't work for either, I mean, he would have 20 DUIs if you kept letting it going. He's just clearly not getting scared.
Yep. But again, he's somehow able to stay in the car. And so you think insurance, that's going to go sky high if you can even get insurance, right? And then,
but your son makes $40 million a year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm talking about
a regular person. Yeah, exactly.
Even the fact that he could get it is a problem. no matter how rich your son is, you shouldn't be able to even qualify for it at this point.
No, you're right. You're right.
You
And
know?
really, you're not supposed to, even if you could afford anything, you're not supposed to drive without it, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, let's talk about your podcast now. In 2022, you started a podcast called Zone 7.
Mhm.
So I think I know what you're going to say based upon something you said earlier, but I've always wanted to know, what does Zone 7 mean?
In Atlanta, there are 6 police zones. So back in the day, before cell phones and before pagers, we couldn't come over the radio and say, "Hey, y'all, after work, let's go meet at a bar." So we would come over the radio and say, "Hey, y'all, after shift, everybody's going to go meet at Zone 7, which we knew meant Manuel's Tavern.
That's
So
cool.
me and Nancy and Renee Rockwell and, all the crowd, we would go to Manuel's Tavern. And that's when you kind of really learned your craft and really learned, who you could trust and who was going to tell you the truth and who was going to help you out. And that kind of became more of a way of life for us. We didn't fool with everybody. We tended to kind of only fool with people that we knew cared about us, truthfully cared about us. And so that became not just the bar Zone 7, but my Zone 7, my people.
I love that. So it has a meaning, such a strong meaning. And in this podcast, you discuss cold cases.
Mm-hmm.
I love your podcast. It's great. I just was listening with my daughter today to the Scott Peterson one because, we're a little obsessed with that case.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Because, technically, there's some cases that we keep talking about that aren't really considered cold cases. Like, that case is closed.
That's right.
Everybody thought that he did it. He even got convicted. He got the death penalty at some point, which they overturned. But that's done. So why is it keep coming back up?
This case, the first thing I thought about when this latest thing happened with, him saying there's going to be new evidence and, the organization trying to help him, I thought, Lacey's mama. I mean, how much more does this woman have to be put through, right? I mean, he's tried.
She really impacted me
Sure.
the whole time. Her crying
whole
on the TV. It's just, even when I hear it today still, I just got the chills right now thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's just so terrible.
Because think about it. You get word from your son-in-law that your daughter, who's 8.5 months pregnant, is missing. That's debilitating. Then he doesn't even call the police. Your husband calls the police. Then you find out he wasn't true to her, that he's had these affairs. Well, that's got to be a punch in the gut, right? Then it comes pretty clear to you she's not coming home and he did it, most likely. And now he's not talking to you. He's not coming to the vigil. He's not searching for her. I mean, all those things have to just be grotesque. Then he's arrested. And when he's arrested, he has changed his appearance and has his brother's ID and cash money. So she's having to deal with all of this betrayal on top of being petrified that she can't find her daughter, then being just destroyed when her daughter and grandson are dead, right? Then they pop up and say, well, he didn't do it. And there's going to be this big, court battle. Then he's, tried to have all these appeals, all these habeas corpus. Everything has failed. Well, now the Innocence Project has got involved and said, oh, there's this van that nobody's ever talked about. Nobody's ever seen.
Who cares?
Right. Right.
It's just like, I do understand that there's not really any hardcore concrete evidence that they've ever found, which means that he just did stuff in a certain way to hide that, right? But you just can't ignore the way that this dude was acting. Like, you just can't. And you were saying on the podcast how his mother-in-law went against every single person, went against him besides like what, a random sister-in-law or something, his best friends.
Sister-in-law. Mm-hmm. His best friends are ghosts. People from high school, people from elementary school, co-workers. Where are they? Where is one teacher? Where is one boss? Where is one best friend? Where is anybody that has been in his life for more than 6 months? Where are they?
Does it kind of piss you off that they waste resources on something like this when there's actual, crimes that aren't solved that could
Well,
use more resources?
I try to be a glass half full person. So here's the way I try to look at it. Put all this out there that you want to, Scott Peterson. You are teaching people that really need to understand. So you teach these detectives, this is why your freaking report is so important. This is why bagging and tagging is so important. This is why interview skills are so important. Do not let this guy wiggle away from you. Don't let him tell you, oh, the only reason I dyed my hair and got cash and was trying to go to Mexico is because I can't go anywhere without being recognized. I don't need $10,000 because I can't go to Publix. You're ridiculous.
Which was a lot of money. It's a lot of money now, but it certainly was a lot of money 20 years ago. Or whenever,
of course.
Of
course. And then you have things like the anchors. He made those anchors, but 4 of them can't be found. Well, we know she was weighed down on each arm and each leg. I mean, that doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened there. And then there's the hair off her head. So you've got hair from Lacey on a pair of pliers in a toolbox inside his boat. Huh? I mean, and again, does any of this make somebody a murderer? No. But the best he's going to be, the very best he's ever going to be, is a piece of shit husband. Right? That's the best he's ever going to be. You're the guy that cheated on a girl that adored you, that was 8.5 months pregnant. You did not search for her when you knew she was missing. You stood at a vigil from a distance and talked on the phone to a woman you were having an affair with prior to her going missing. Now, if that don't make somebody a piece of crap, I don't know what the definition would be. That is the best Scott Peterson is ever going to be. But I think he's much, much worse than that.
I think the cheating thing's like, whatever, men cheat. It crosses over when everyone knew that she was missing and that he wasn't helping. I'm sorry, like even if you cheat on someone, that doesn't mean you don't still have like some kind of you're married to the woman, for Christ's sakes. Like, even if you hated her so bad, even if she made you pick up your socks every day or whatever, and you hated her, any normal human would be like, oh my God, this is terrible. If it was genuinely a robber or whatever they think.
I have heard men say, oh, that affair didn't mean anything to me. Like they would never leave their wife. I've heard them say it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I get it. To your point, the minute their wife is missing, they do a 360. They're the one looking. They're the one panicked. They want her back because they do love her. Again, we didn't see that here.
No, it's enough for me, honestly.
Yeah.
And then just look how normal people act.
And then he tells everybody, I'm going to go play golf. I'm golfing. So her sister, everybody thinks he's golfing. But then he went fishing. And where did they float up? So now what they're trying to get us to believe is somebody else kidnapped her in this van. And of all the places in California, they just happened to go where he was fishing. But nobody saw them. And if you notice like where the parking lot is to the water, it's a good minute. It's a good ways away. So you want me to believe they were able to do that unseen?
Is it possible, I just thought of this right now, that they're maybe thinking that he hired someone to do it and he actually didn't kill her? Because that would make sense as to his actions, that he knew she was dead and that's why he wasn't doing anything. But at the same time,
that's good.
Maybe he knew. That's because if they could find DNA on that truck or whatever they think they're testing, then technically he didn't do it.
Let me say this. let me just say this. If I paid you to kill Walt and I told you, hey, I'm going fishing at Lake Lanier, and you throw Walt in Lake Lanier, I'm going to lose my mind. So I agree with Scott's mother. I will quote his mother. Tell me Scott wasn't that stupid, or even Scott can't be that stupid, however she phrased it. I mean, how in the world would you be that stupid?
I don't know. I mean, the whole entire thing is just kind of, it's weird because it was planned out a little bit because he didn't leave behind any evidence. So it seems like he planned out something to be kind of clean with that.
But here's the thing that's so crazy. When you start talking about Christmas Eve, you had somewhere you had to be. You had told Lacey earlier you would pick up the present for the father-in-law. Well, then suddenly you couldn't do that. Why? What got you so busy you couldn't go pick the gift up? It's little things. So there were mistakes made. We know there were more than, 5 anchors, or there were 5 anchors. 4 of them, you can't tell us where they are. You've got this affair.
They can't search around where they found her body somehow. I know that that's outrageous to say that.
I don't know, but I'm just saying, you know what I mean? There's so much, and a lot of it might be circumstantial, but, when I was talking to Laura Engel, Laura's so fantastic. And she's such
cool.
a pro. Oh, my God. Okay, so she's always so even, and she'll bring you right back down, where me and you might be sitting here going, oh, this idiot, he did it. We don't use words like alleged, So she said to me, look, what if the blood in the van does come back to match Lacey? I said, well, then Scott Peterson stole that van. It's still not.
Or he hired the person
he hired the person. But
he's involved somehow.
I truly believe that. I mean, that one thing would not get rid of the other 40. It just wouldn't.
The thing is, though, is that there's some lawyer that wants to say that they got out of this. They got him out of this because that will make them like the next. Who's the guy with Casey Anthony? Jose Baez, right?
Mm-hmm.
He'll be like this next level defense attorney that could get you out of the most obvious crime, right?
Yep.
Same with OJ. Mm-hmm. And they're going to get it on some bullshit technicality of evidence not being logged correctly or something. I just look at it like who cares? Like, let's move on to things that need actual resources.
But again, that's why I'm saying this should be a training for everybody, just like OJ. You better pay attention. Do you know at the Simpson scene that there was a bloody thumbprint on the back gate?
Yeah, I do on my website, I do these high profile and celebrity death dissections every week where I go through the cases and the autopsy reports and kind of write it up.
Excellent.
And I saw that there was a couple mishaps with the
training.
Yeah, with
training.
Getting the evidence collected. But can you explain it to everybody? Because it's really interesting.
So there was a bloody thumbprint on the back gate. They noted it in the walkthrough, but they never went back and collected it. So now while we're arguing about one little speck on the Bronco or one little speck on the Sauk, that would have been a money tree because that would have proved, if that had been O.J. Simpson's thumbprint, that he was there while they were bleeding. That's better than a glove. That's better than anything. But they didn't get it.
I mean, in hindsight, because you just don't ever know what's going to happen. I think that even if you're a cop and you work in LA and stuff, you're used to going to firefighters, the same thing. You're used to dealing with famous people just because of where you're at.
Yep.
But especially to some guys, he's like the football player. He was the guy. And I think some people just might have got a little bit too starstruck about the grand scene of it. I mean, nothing like that has even really happened since then, that some super famous person murdered somebody like that, right? I mean, they just walked up on this scene and it was just too much overstimulation and they screwed up because of that, probably. You know?
I think they were trying to get in touch with him because they needed to notify him, right? But that's another clue to this whole thing is when they notify him and he says, oh no, that's horrible what happened to Nicole. But he never asked about his children
Yeah.
because he knew they weren't dead because he didn't kill them. I mean, there's, just little things that become really big things if you're really paying attention. But again, O.J. Simpson is a fantastic, case study of what not to do.
All right, let's talk about CrimeCon.
All right.
So I'm going to CrimeCon for my very first time this year, and I'm so excited. I'm excited to meet you in person and hang out. It'd be so cool.
Yes.
You've been there 5 times, if not more. Did they
I
take
have
off for
not-
the pandemic?
I have not missed one. And during the pandemic, we did a little online thing. So I've been to every one.
That's so cool.
I don't plan on missing one. I've told them I'm going to be the Delta Dawn of CrimeCon. Like, I'm just going to keep showing up, this crazy woman.
So when you go there, do you do a lecture? You do workshops? Like what are some of the things you've done in the past?
I have done a cold case where I get the crowd to help me. I do a thing called Ride Along, which is a VIP package where I bring a special guest with me to do a case and let the audience, again, try to help us solve it. With the person in tow is usually somebody significant. And I've, been on panels doing different things. I've done live podcasts with Nancy and Joe Scott Morgan and other people. So it's a tremendous event. I mean, it's one of the first, or the first, I guess, large group of volunteers that will jump on a case, help fund a case and do testing. I think last year they funded several cases through Othram. That's the best way to get answers right now that I've ever seen. Othram is just solving 3, 4, 5 cases a day. They're like a cold case machine of solvability. So, I mean, it's a place where you meet detectives and victims and case agents and experts in every discipline you can think of, and they're just walking around. So all of a sudden you look up and there's Dr. Ann Burgess, and then there's Nancy Grace, and then there's Paul Holes, and you're like, this is crazy. And not only do you see those people, but if you say, hey, Paul, can you sign this? Or Nancy, can I take a picture? They're like, sure. So accessible. It's mind-boggling. And then you have this whole podcast row. So all these people that you've listened to for all these years, they're just sitting there, happy to talk to you, happy to share ideas and things like that. And then you may have somebody like Beth Holloway or Ethan Chapin's mom. They're walking by, so you get a chance to, really reach out to them and tell them, hey, I've thought about you since, the case happened. And, when this thing goes to trial, you're going to have a ton of people praying for you and thinking about you. So it's just like nothing you've ever experienced. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm doing a lecture actually and doing the podcast live too, which
excellent.
We've never done the podcast live, so it's going to be
it's going to be great.
It's going to be interesting.
Honey, you're
going to
be in the
mess
zone.
up that much. Yeah,
No.
we're like really excited about it.
Yeah.
Are you? So I know that you have your hand in a million things right now. Are you working on anything new that we don't know about, or you're just?
Yes.
Can you tell us?
I can. I'm actually working on something that is, I think, something that I'm as excited about as I've ever been about any project that I've ever worked on. But in March, I was able to go to the Wildlife Forensic Academy in South Africa and train on anti-poaching.
Oh, that's cool.
Hands down, the greatest training I've ever participated in. And, on top of having all these tremendous experts, you open your door to your chalet and there's just giraffes walking by. And then there's a herd of wildebeest, and then there's rhinos. And I'm like, why would anybody ever leave here? Like, it's just extraordinary. The people were just peerless and lovely and kind and fun. And so I am working on the Wildlife CSI Academy stateside to help support how we're going to help train their rangers and other folks that sometimes have limited funding and supplies and tools and that sort of thing. So we're going to start training people and helping save some of these animals.
I was just talking. I had an interview last week with Dr. Jason Bird. Do you know him? He's a
I
forensic
do.
pathologist. Yeah, he's
Yes.
awesome. I love that dude.
He is fantastic.
So we were talking about that because he is involved with the wildlife forensic associate.
Yeah.
I don't know what the name of it is, but
Yes.
I was asking him that because I don't know if you remember back in the day when Dr. Bodden did that autopsy show. He was talking about this case of this elk that was killed in Yellowstone
Oh,
Park.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, and how they traced and found out. And
Correct.
he was at some the guy brought him to a taxidermist, and that's how they were able to
Yes,
figure
they
out
had
who
named
did
the
it.
elk. The elk.
I know, I forget what his name
Yeah.
is. Yeah, he had a name though. He
Yeah.
was like a famous elk in
Very.
in
Yeah.
Yellowstone. So
Yes.
yeah, it was.
Well, let me
it's
brag on
really
Jason.
interesting.
I'll brag on Dr. Bird, Jason Bird, for a minute at the University of Florida. So before I went to the academy, I talked to him because several of us had an idea of maybe how to help, because in South Africa, in certain parts, the illiteracy rate is like 87%. So they're not going to be able to read a police report, right? So what could you do visually to help out? So Jason was working with me because I wanted to float this idea, almost like a peer review, to several different people. And I contacted probably 20 people. They all said, yeah, that's a great idea. And so we wanted to do crime scene markers that were actual visual, not numbers. Because if you look at an overall, any crime scene I've ever done, it might say, 1, 3, 7, 9, 12. You see these numbers, but you don't know what's next to them with the overall view, right? So it could be a bullet or blood or a cigarette butt or whatever. So I thought if we had animals and paw prints and darts and those sorts of things on large markers, then from a distance you could see the scene. And so Jason was like, yeah, that sounds great. Do you know this person over at MedTech? And I was like, no, I don't know her. He's like, call her, tell her I said to call you, and tell her to put it on my tab.
That's awesome.
So the crime scene markers he paid for, and let me just say this clearly, I had never met the man in person.
Yeah, he just seems so cool, and he's like you, like he just like loves what he's doing, and it really shows, and that's great.
Yeah, tremendous. So Melanie over at MedTech worked them all out. Like I said, I had several other people that were so giving and so wonderful to help. Karen Smith being one of them. Karen gave money. Karen said, hey, instead of being crime scene markers, make them a little bit bigger, like maybe the yard stand. And Melanie's like, oh, we can do that. And they can all still be yellow. So it worked out great. And they are in South Africa right now.
That's so cool. That's such a great experience that you got that just came, some random thing that just came from this. It's great.
Yeah.
And it's great to share your life story with everyone, because I always tell everyone that I always meet these young kids that they go to college for biology and they don't know what they want to do, or they don't know what jobs are out there. And then we just talk to people that do all of these interesting things. And there's so many different things you could do in this field if you're interested in science. And it's really awesome to hear your story. So thanks for sharing it with us.
Of course. Look what you're doing with your platform, though. I think what you and your daughter are doing is just fabulous. It is brilliant, and it's needed, because you're sharing information that they can't get anywhere else the way you're giving it. And like you've said, from the hip, the way they can understand it, and then showing them all these different people. So I can't wait to hang out with y'all either.
Well, thanks so much for being here today. It was so great to speak with you.
Absolutely. I had a great time.
Before we go, where could everybody find you? Your podcast is Zone 7.
Yes, it's everywhere you would normally get a podcast, Apple and Spotify and everywhere. And I'm all over social media. So you can look up Sheryl McCollum or the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute or Zone 7.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive,
without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.